Welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I am Brad Weeks with LiveWell Capital, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Ben Bashir, president and co-founder of LiveWell Capital, about how to think through and understand executive compensation fundamentals. Hi, Ben. How are you doing today?
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Absolutely great. Well, to get started, what are the fundamental elements of executive compensation that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest mistake we see our clients make is they tend to look at base salary as the only part of their compensation, and they tend to ignore the other parts of compensation that, quite frankly, can be more important than base salary. And so where we typically start is educating executives on what typically are the four parts of compensation. And when we look at what the four parts of compensation are, the first one is obvious, base salary. Everybody knows what it is. It's not hard to calculate. If it's 100 or 200, 300, or it's 50,000, you know how to calculate that. You know what it is. Second part of compensation is bonus. If there is a bonus that gets paid, is it quarterly? Is it annual? And typically that bonus is tied to a percentage of your base salary. So is it 20% of base, 50% of base, 100% of base? And it's great to understand how likely that is to get paid out. So those are the first two parts of compensation. The third is what we call equity. And if you're at a Fortune 500 company, that can come in the form of things called stock options or restricted stock units. If you're at a non-public company, that might be called phantom stock or synthetic equity. But that can be another big leg of the compensation stool. And in some ways, the further you move up the food chain in Fortune 500 companies, that may be the biggest part of your overall compensation. And then the fourth one may be just as obvious as the first one was. What are your benefits? And when we look at benefits, that could mean, what is your health insurance benefit? What percentage of the premiums do they pay? Do you have long-term disability? Do you have life insurance? Do you have paid time off? Is there a match on your 401k? And so when we look at those four things together, we can typically help our clients analyze what their overall compensation package is worth and think multidimensionally beyond just base salary.
Got it. So as you begin to analyze this, I mean, where do you even start?
So this could obviously sound a little self-promoting, but I think if you have a great financial advisor, like you would at LiveWell Capital, your financial advisor could help you analyze that. A lot of times your accountant might be able to help you analyze that, or you might have friends in the industry. It's one of the benefits of keeping up with people in the industry that might have been in jobs like this that could help you analyze it. But more than anything, where I would start is I would make a list of those four things and then try to put a numeric value to each. That sounds really simple. And depending on how complicated the comp package is, it might be difficult. But I would ask the HR manager, the recruiter, or whoever it is that is recruiting you, what the expected compensation value is in each of those four buckets. So what is target compensation? Base salary, you won't need any help on. But what's target compensation on bonus? What did people make in the past in this role on bonus? What was the average payout? What's a way for them to calculate what the equity of the company is worth? Another interesting thing about equity is a lot of times it's going to be tied to stock price of the company. So how confident are you in the growth of the company? In general, if you're joining a company that you don't believe in their growth strategy, that could be problematic if a lot of your compensation is coming in the form of equity in that company. The last point there would be, what is the expected value of the benefits package? That one's also not all that hard to calculate. But if you can put a numeric value to each of those 4 elements, it's going to put you in a very strong place to analyze what the package is actually worth.
Got it. That's great. So I think step 1 is probably understanding, especially if you're making a transition, where you are in the value of that package versus where you might be going in the value of that one. Step 2 then would probably be beginning to negotiate some of those details. Can you break down where you start and how you would go about doing that?
Well, that's a great first step. I think you see, and I see people all the time that leave companies for what they think is a more compelling compensation package, but because they haven't done the math, they might actually be leaving for less money. And step 1, it's a point that I don't want to miss. Step 1 is a big step in understanding where you are currently. Before you can really even move on to step 2, you need to understand step 1. Step 1 is also, in answering your question, going to help you negotiate what your next compensation package is worth. And a lot of times, if you're leaving and you're leaving equity on the table, let's say, you have unvested stock options, you have unvested restricted stock, a lot of times you're going to be asking for the next company to pay you a signing bonus or give you an initial equity grant to true you up for what you're walking away from, right? So again, in financial planning, you need to think multidimensionally. What was my total package worth where I was? What is my total package going to be worth where I'm going? And then what potentially am I leaving on the table that they would need to true me up for in the form of a signing bonus or initial equity grant?
Got it. And Ben, I think it's interesting as you mentioned that. What about things like unvested is one thing, but what about underwater stock options? Do those have a value? Is there a way I can negotiate for something around that?
Well, the great thing is this is America, so we can negotiate for anything we want to negotiate for. Underwater stock options are an interesting one, and we won't get overly technical in this episode because we're not going to try to get too far into the weeds. But if you meet with the right kind of financial planner, there is something called time value with your stock options. So you might have stock options that are underwater right now, but in the future, they're projected to be above water. They're projected to be worth something. And there are calculations you can do when you're leaving a company to talk about what those might be worth when we include time value to really do a calculation with what they're worth, even though right this second they might not be worth anything. So the devil really is in the details on negotiating these things and understanding how to ask for things that might not be overly intuitive. The other thing that we've realized in companies in corporate America is there's no good benchmarking for signing bonus. You know, if you look at these companies, Proxy, they have great benchmarking for what's target for salary, what's target for equity, what's target for bonus. The benefits usually are what they are, but there's almost no benchmarking whatsoever for signing bonuses. So we sometimes find the easiest thing to negotiate is a signing bonus up front, because you don't get in this egocentric predicament of potentially getting bumped into a salary band that's higher than your boss. Mm-hmm. Whereas everybody forgets what their signing bonus was if it was 5 or 10 years ago. So we've found the easiest thing, if you want to true up potentially your start, if you're leaving something on the table, is in the form of signing bonus, maybe even above equity.
That's interesting. That's a really good point. And I've had, friends of mine as well as clients, get asked the question from the recruiter, what's it going to take to get you in here? What do you need? How do you answer that question? How do you approach that question?
Well, first, and we'll get to this a little later on. I think at LiveWell Capital, we talk a lot about life beyond money. So not everything's a financial calculation. If you love the culture of where you are, and love what you're doing, there might not be a financial answer to that question if you really like the spot you're in. But if you are thinking it's time for a move, you're ready for the next growth phase in the career, and the current vehicle you're in, the current company you're at, can't get you to the future life you want, then number one is, as we talked about earlier, is understanding your current comp package. Number two is looking at how much more you need to get above your current comp package to feel comfortable with taking that risk. And number three is I usually take that number and bump it by 20%. And that might sound arbitrary, but at the company you're at, you already know what's under the hood. You already know what are the things that work. What are the little things about the culture that don't work? What are the little nuances about boss or coworkers that are positive, that are negative? And whenever you're going to a new company, there's all these things you don't know and almost you can't know. And I do think there's a premium that you need to be paid for that if you're happy where you are, that a lot of people don't talk about. So I would look at my current comp, I would look at my desired comp, and then I would put some premium on top of that of 10 or 20%, because there's some risk anytime you jump. And I would be negotiating with the recruiter on where there's room. If you're out of room on base salary and equity, then you might be going to signing bonus or something else like that. But it's understanding there's risk anytime you make a jump.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so what are some of the non-compensation fundamentals you should consider as you look to make a move to another company?
So I think there's three or four we traditionally talk about. One is culture, and culture is this invisible thing that you know when you have a great culture, and when you have a bad culture, you know it too. And I would define culture as just healthy relationships where everybody in the company is becoming the best version of themselves every day. And if you're in one of those cultures, you have bosses that get the best out of you. You make your bosses better. You have coworkers you make better. They make you better. People encourage each other. It's a place people look forward to going to work, look forward to hanging out after work. And culture is the number one thing that if you're in a place that has a fantastic culture, I wouldn't say it's the outlier, but it's certainly not everywhere. And so culture is our number one. Our number two is maybe understanding what the work-life balance parameters are going to be at the new career. And work-life balance can be a cliche. It can be overly used, but what's their PTO policy? Do they have remote work policy? If you have games you want to coach for your kids and those games start at 4:30, is that a possibility? And so understanding how this is going to work with the desired life you want, because ultimately at the end of the day, we are working partially for the passion of work, but we're also working for what we get to do when we're not at work and with our families. And is this going to enable better family time, enable better balance, enable you to become a better person, or is it not? And then the third thing we're typically looking at is city travel. Are you going to have to relocate? How are you thinking about that? Is it in a part of town that's close to your house? What are the taxes of the place you're going to be living? Right? It's kind of a financial thing, kind of a non-financial thing. Right. We have clients that get recruited to work in a place where there's no state tax. Well, we need to take that into account. Do you love that city? All things being equal, if I love a city, if I love a state and there's no state tax, that's better. So again, a bunch of different things that are multidimensional that we need to be thinking through as we're doing planning.
That's good. Yeah, I think that culture and value alignment is just really critical to, ultimately how you're going to fit in that role in that company. Is there anything else today, Ben, that we should make sure we hit on before we go?
Brad, I know you have a specific example of a situation with our firm where you actually did something with this underwater stock option value. So I know it's my interview, but I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a client from a company that most of the stock had gone down. And they were trying to figure out exactly, is there any value to these stock options, as you just mentioned? So we ran a report, and there's something, not to get too deep into the weeds, but called the unvested value of your options, the Black-Scholes value, as well as the time value of your vested options. We were able to provide a report that gave the value of those. And this client wasn't planning on getting much of a signing bonus. They went from really negotiating for very little to actually negotiating to get $100,000 of additional compensation because they understood the value of their equity package with their previous firm. And so that was a great win for that client.
And $100,000, I don't care who you are. That's pretty good, right?
It is. It is. It was a great success story for how we were able to add value for a client.
Brad, I know I have a way of thinking about negotiating and talking to recruiters about the amount I would want or our clients would want. And I know we think similarly, but I know you've thought about it a little bit differently with a little bit different take. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Ben, I have a client. He is a CDO at a company, and he was looking to move his family from a place that they love to another city. And as he was talking to the recruiter, she asked him what his current compensation was and asked, what would it take to get you to move and to come here? And so this friend of mine and I were having a conversation, and he was saying, this is what I really think I need to make this decision. And I said, just take a second, step back. What's the number you would need to give that recruiter to pack up all your things in a box today, put your family in the car, and drive to this new city? That number was a dramatically different number. And what was great about it, that's the number he gave to the recruiter. They said no, and he felt really good about it. He wasn't forced to make a really hard decision. See, a lot of times people will negotiate and they'll put a number out there that still forces them to make a difficult decision. I think the goal is with these decisions, work with that other company, put a number forth that you're going to show up, you're going to be excited about the opportunity, and you're going to be excited about whatever transition needs to happen, as opposed to the contrary.
Which you call negotiating against yourself, right?
I do.
If you throw the number out there that you'd be pumped and excited to go, it really puts you in a place where the decision's easy. It puts the onus on them, right?
Exactly. You're negotiating for yourself, not against yourself. And I think that's really, really important.
So here's kind of what I would say to wrap things up. If you look at how much we all work, and let's say the average tech executive is working 50 hours a week. And for some people that are listening to this, they might say, wow, I work a lot more than that. And there might be some people that work less than that. But let's just say the average tech executive is working 50 hours a week. That's 2,500 hours a year. Over a 10-year period, that's 25,000 hours. And one thing that we think is really interesting is you'll probably spend more time at work cumulatively than you will with your kids or your spouse, if you don't include sleeping time and you're at home in downtime. And so one thing that LiveWell spend enough time thinking about is, I'm giving this much of my time to this career. Is it something I'm passionate about? Do I love the work I'm doing? Am I making a difference? Am I being fairly compensated for the role I'm in? Do I have the work-life balance I want? Do I get to live in the part of the country I want to live in? Do I love my coworkers? We think too often people look at their work too one-dimensionally and focus just on one part of it when they're negotiating. And we think all of those things, if you're going to spend that much time at work, that much time in corporate America, are huge in helping people evaluate what's the right decision. And one of our encouragements to clients are to take a step back and really think about all of those things when you're making the decision. And all of those things, some of them involve money and some of them don't. But if we're all going to devote this much time to our work, let's make it count. Let's make it intentional. Let's make it at a place we love. And so that's the thought I would leave you with today. The other thought I would leave everyone with today is, I think there's big value in having friends in the industry, having friends on LinkedIn, and knowing what you're worth, knowing what people in your job make. There are benchmarking studies out there. You can get online and read the proxies of Fortune 500 companies to figure out who makes what in some jobs and what their compensation philosophy is. So in addition to really being intentional, I would also say be informed, because I think when you're informed, you get to make much better decisions. And information is like adding 50 IQ points to your ability to negotiate. So that would be our view in the short time we had today.
That's great. Well, thank you, Ben Bashir, for joining us today. This is Brad Weeks with LiveWell Capital. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, and have a great day.